Have you ever pondered how climate change and gender inequality are closely intertwined? It might seem like they are two separate issues, but surprisingly, they intersect in ways we often overlook. Let's start with a simple understanding of these two global challenges. Climate change, as we know, is the long-term alteration of temperature and typical weather patterns in a place. It's a global crisis that affects us all, yet its impacts are not uniformly distributed. Vulnerable and marginalized groups bear the brunt, and among these, women are the most affected. On the other hand, gender inequality is the unequal treatment or perception of individuals based on their gender. It stems from differences in socially constructed gender roles. So, how do these two intersect? Climate change exacerbates existing inequalities, including gender disparities. Women, primarily in developing countries, often bear the burden of collecting water, food, and fuel. As resources become scarce due to climate change, their workload increases, leaving less time for education or income-generating activities. Moreover, women are often excluded from decision-making processes related to environmental and climate issues, further worsening the situation. It's a vicious cycle, but understanding this intersection is the first step towards breaking it. Delving into this complex relationship can shed light on how to tackle these pressing issues effectively. Let's traverse the globe and listen to stories of those directly experiencing these intertwined issues. On the sun-blistered plains of Kenya, we meet Amina, a mother of 5. Climate change has turned her once fertile lands into a desolate expanse. As the primary caretaker, she walks miles every day in search of water and firewood, tasks made tougher by the increasingly unpredictable weather patterns. Crossing over to the flood-prone lowlands of Bangladesh, we encounter Fatima. Her home, a fragile bamboo structure, has been washed away multiple times by the rising tides. Amidst the turmoil, Fatima shoulders the responsibility of rebuilding her family's life over and over again. In the highlands of Guatemala, we find Maria, a farmer. Unpredictable rains have made it harder for her to grow crops. The burden of feeding her family grows heavier each day, especially as her husband, like many men in her village, has left to find work in the city. Further north, in the Arctic Circle, we meet Inuit woman Naja. She speaks of how the melting ice is changing her way of life. Hunting, a task traditionally undertaken by men, is becoming increasingly dangerous. Yet, it's the women who bear the brunt of these changes, as they grapple with the scarcity of food and the emotional toll of worrying for their husband's safety. Now, let's journey to the heat-stricken regions of India. Here, we meet Lakshmi, a textile worker. As temperatures rise, working conditions become unbearable. But she, like many women, cannot afford to stop working despite the risk of heat stroke. These women, from different corners of the world, share a common narrative. They are fighting a dual battle against climate change and entrenched gender inequality. Their daily struggles are exacerbated by the environmental crises unfolding in their backyards. Yet, they persist, they adapt, and they survive. These stories are not isolated incidents, but rather represent a global pattern. How does this complex interplay between climate change and gender inequality affect us all? You see, the consequences extend far beyond individual experiences, reaching into the heart of our global society. Consider economic development. When women and girls are disproportionately impacted by climate change, their ability to contribute to the economy is hindered. They may be unable to complete their education, find employment, or start businesses, all of which can stifle economic growth on a global scale. Social stability is also at stake. In communities where gender inequality is exacerbated by the impacts of climate change, tensions can escalate, leading to conflict and unrest. This can disrupt societies and even lead to mass migrations, affecting countries and regions far removed from the initial point of crisis. Then there's the fight against climate change itself. Women are often key players in sustainability efforts, from managing resources at the household level to leading climate action initiatives. If we sideline women due to gender inequality, we are essentially handicapping our own efforts to combat this global crisis. Recognizing these intersections is key to finding holistic solutions. These aren't separate issues to be dealt with in isolation. They're deeply intertwined challenges that require integrated, inclusive strategies to overcome. And that's a reality we all need to understand. So, what have we learned from this exploration? We've journeyed through the intricate landscape where climate change and gender inequality intersect. We've seen how these two global issues are not separate but deeply interwoven. Climate change is not gender-blind. It disproportionately affects women, especially those in vulnerable and marginalized communities. We've heard the personal stories, the voices from the front lines. These narratives have brought to life the stark realities that many face daily, painting a poignant picture of resilience in the face of adversity. We've also examined the broader global impact, how these issues ripple out, affecting not just individuals, but communities, nations, and indeed our entire planet. But our journey doesn't end here. It's a call to action. By acknowledging the intersectionality of climate change and gender inequality, we are empowered to make a difference. We can push for inclusive policies, advocate for gender equality, and promote sustainable practices. By understanding these complex relationships, we can all play a part in creating a more equitable and sustainable world.